Years passed. The village changed slowly, almost imperceptibly. Not everyone chose to receive their memories back, but enough did that a kind of balance developed. Some people walked through their days with the soft edges of forgotten time. Others moved with the sharp clarity of full remembrance. And both ways of being came to be seen as valid. The curse itself began to weaken. The shepherd explained it to Thomas one evening when he visited the cottage, as he sometimes did now. Curses and blessings both feed on belief, the shepherd said. When everyone accepted the forgetting, when no one questioned it, the curse was strong. But now that people are aware, now that they're making choices, the curse has less power. Some people have stopped losing hours altogether. Will it end completely? Thomas asked. Perhaps, the shepherd said, or perhaps it will transform into something else. Perhaps the village will simply become a place where people have an unusual relationship with time and memory, where the boundary between remembering and forgetting is more fluid than in other places. Is that good or bad? Thomas asked. The shepherd smiled. Neither, both. Like everything in life, it simply is. Thomas was 50 now, his hair more gray than dark. He had never married, but he was no longer lonely. He had friends who remembered him, relationships that had depth and continuity. He had purpose in helping people find the shepherd's cottage, in supporting those who made the journey, and being a bridge between the world of full memory and the world of forgetting. And sometimes on quiet evenings he would sit by his fire and think about the choice he had made. Not to break the bottle, not to force memory on anyone, but to offer the choice, to trust people with their own lives. He couldn't know if it was the right decision. There was still suffering in the village. There always would be. Some people who drank from their bottles were overwhelmed by the returning memories. Some relationships that had been peaceful became complicated when both parties remembered different versions of their shared past. But there was also new richness. People who remembered their full lives seemed more present, more engaged. They knew themselves in ways that those who forgot could not, and those who chose to forget consciously. Now, rather than having it forced upon them, seemed more at peace with their choice. The awareness that it was a choice made all the difference. Thomas thought about the ethical frameworks he had wrestled with that night in the shepherd's cottage. Autonomy, harm reduction, paternalism. In the end, he had chosen autonomy, the belief that people deserved to know and choose for themselves, even if those choices led to suffering. Was it the right choice? He would never know for certain, but it was a choice he could live with, a choice that honored his belief in human dignity and the right of people to author their own lives. And perhaps that was enough. On the evening of Thomas's 60th birthday, he made the walk through the forest to the shepherd's cottage. He had been making this journey regularly for 23 years now, and his feet knew the path even in darkness. The shepherd greeted him at the door, looking exactly as they had the first night Thomas had arrived, ancient, ageless, unchanging. "Thomas," they said warmly, "come in. I have something for you." Inside, the cottage was as it always was, shelves lined with bottles of glowing light, fire crackling in the hearth, the scent of applewood smoke. But on the table sat a bottle Thomas had never seen before. It was different from the others. Where most bottles held light that swirled and moved, this one held light that was perfectly still, perfectly clear, like crystal, like ice, like the clearest water in the deepest well. "What is it?" Thomas asked. "Your gift," the shepherd said. "For 23 years you have helped others make the journey here. You have guided them, supported them, held space for their choices. You have been a bridge between remembering and forgetting, helping the village transform from a place of curse to a place of choice." The shepherd picked up the bottle and held it out to Thomas. "This contains something I have never offered anyone before, the ability to forget." Thomas stared at the bottle. His heart began to beat faster. "Just once," the shepherd continued. "One memory, one burden that has become too heavy to carry. You can choose what to forget, and I will take it from you. I will preserve it here in this bottle, and you will be free of it. Wait." Thomas's hand trembled as he reached for the bottle. He thought about all the memories he carried, the weight of them, the burden of perfect recall. He thought about his mother's death, which he remembered in excruciating detail. He thought about the end of his relationship with Alara, every painful word preserved perfectly. He thought about the loneliness of his youth, when he had watched everyone around him drift through life while he remembered everything sharp and clear and isolating. Any of these he could forget. Any of these weights he could set down. "Why?" Thomas asked. "Why offer this to me now?" The shepherd's smile was gentle. "Because you have earned it. Because you have carried the weight of memory alone for so long. And because," they paused, "because I want to know what you will choose. You who spent so long wrestling with whether people should remember or forget. You who decided that choice itself was sacred. What will you choose for yourself?" Thomas sat down heavily in the chair by the fire. He held the bottle in his hands, feeling its cool weight. Inside, the clear light waited, patient and still. He thought about forgetting, about the relief it would bring, about waking up one morning and finding that some burden he had carried for decades was simply gone, lifted, released. It was tempting, so tempting. But then he thought about his grandmother's echo in the clearing, dissolving into morning mist. He thought about what she had said. Better to carry the weight than to lose the treasure. Every memory he carried, even the painful ones, was part of who he was, part of his story, part of the architecture of his self. If he removed one, even one, would he still be Thomas? Would he still be the person who had helped transform the village? Would he still understand the weight that others carried? And more than that, was it right for him to forget when he had spent 23 years telling others that they should have the choice to remember? Would it be hypocritical, or would it be human? He sat there for a long time, the firelight flickering across his weathered face, the bottle resting in his hands. Finally, he looked up at the shepherd. "No," he said quietly. "Thank you, but no." The shepherd tilted their head. "You're certain?" "I am," Thomas said. He set the bottle carefully on the table. "I spent years wrestling with the question of whether memory or forgetting was better, and I learned that there's no universal answer. For some people, in some circumstances, forgetting is a mercy. For others, remembering is essential. But for me," he paused, searching for the right words. "For me, my memories are who I am, all of them. The joyful and the painful, the beautiful and the devastating. If I let go of even one, I won't be complete anymore." "Even though they're heavy?" the shepherd asked. "Even though," Thomas confirmed. "I've learned to carry them. They're part of my strength now, not just my burden. And besides," a slight smile crossed his face, "I'm not alone in carrying them anymore. I have friends now who remember, people I can talk to about the weight. That makes it bearable." The shepherd nodded slowly. "You have learned something that took me millennia to understand, that community transforms burden into something that can be borne. That sharing weight doesn't have it, it makes it entirely different." They reached for the bottle and held it up to the light. The clear light within remained perfectly still. "This bottle will remain empty then," the shepherd said. "A testament to the choice you made, the choice to remain whole even when wholeness is heavy. What will you do with it?" Thomas asked. "Keep it," the shepherd said, "as a reminder, as a symbol. Perhaps someday someone else will face the same choice you did. Perhaps they'll choose differently. Perhaps they'll need the mercy of forgetting. And that's all right, too. Different people, different needs, different choices, all valid." Thomas continued visiting the shepherd regularly for the next 15 years. He brought people who were ready to make the choice. He offered guidance to those who were uncertain. He held space for those who chose to remember and those who chose to forget. And slowly, Thomas began to age in earnest. The years that had been kind to him for so long began to take their toll. His steps became slower, his vision dimmed. His bones ached with the damp of autumn mornings. One evening, when Thomas was 75, he made what he somehow knew would be his last journey to the shepherd's cottage. Frost had died 2 winters before, and Thomas walked alone through the ancient forest, using a staff to steady himself on the uneven path. The shepherd greeted him with their usual warmth, but something in their eyes suggested they knew as well. "Come in, old friend," they said. "Sit, rest." Thomas settled into the chair by the fire with a grateful sigh. His body was tired, so tired. "I won't be able to make this journey much longer," he said. "I know," the shepherd replied. "The village needs someone to help guide people here, to explain the choice, to support them." "They do?" the shepherd agreed. Thomas looked into the fire. There's a young woman. Her name is Maya. She's 23, and she's like me. She doesn't lose hours. She remembers everything. She came to me a year ago, confused and lonely, wondering why she was different. I remember, the shepherd said. You brought her here. She chose to keep her memories, Thomas said. And she asked if she could help, if she could do what I do. Guide others, explain the choice, be a bridge. And you think she's ready? Thomas nodded. She's kinder than I was at her age. More patient, less burdened by the weight of memory, because she's seen from the beginning that it can be shared. She do well. The shepherd was quiet for a moment. Then they said, will you ask her to come here so I can meet her properly? I will, Thomas promised. They sat in comfortable silence for a while, listening to the crackle of the fire. Finally, Thomas spoke again. May I ask you something? Something I've wondered about all these years? Of course. Do you ever get tired of collecting the lost hours? Of holding all these memories that aren't yours? Of watching humans struggle with choices that have no right answers? The shepherd smiled. Yes, sometimes, but I also find it beautiful. The way you wrestle with impossible questions. The way you choose, knowing you might be wrong. The way you carry on anyway, doing the best. You can with what you know. There's a kind of courage in that. A stubborn human courage that I admire. Even when we choose wrong? Thomas asked. There is no wrong, the shepherd said gently. There are only choices and consequences. You chose to give people autonomy. That choice had consequences, some painful, some beautiful. If you had chosen differently, there would have been different consequences, equally mixed. The rightness isn't in the outcome. It's in the choosing itself, in taking responsibility, and doing the best you can. Thomas felt something settle in his chest, a peace he hadn't quite found before. Thank you, he said, for everything, for showing me the choice, for letting me wrestle with it, for keeping the lost hours safe. Thank you, the shepherd replied, for transforming a curse into an opportunity, for teaching your village that choice itself has value, for being a good shepherd, not just of sheep, but a people navigating impossible questions. Thomas died 3 months later, peacefully, in his sleep. The whole village mourned him, both those who remembered fully and those who forgot in pieces came to his funeral, united in their grief for a man who had given them the gift of choice. Maya took up his role as he had hoped she would. She walked people through the forest to the shepherd's cottage. She explained the choice. She held space for their decisions, and she added her own wisdom to the work, insights Thomas had never had, perspectives that came from living in a village that was already transformed rather than transforming. The story of Thomas and the shepherd became part of the village's folklore. Children grew up hearing about the shepherd who had found the cottage of lost hours, about the choice he had made, about the courage it took to let others choose for themselves, even when you thought you knew what was best. And in the shepherd's cottage, on a shelf among thousands of bottles of glowing light, there remained one bottle, that held no hours at all, an empty vessel of clear glass, a testament to a choice made in love and humility, the choice to remain whole, the choice to bear the weight, the choice to trust in the value of choice itself. Visitors sometimes asked about it. That, the shepherd would say, belonged to a very wise man, a man who understood that the question isn't whether to remember or forget, but whether to choose with courage and compassion, whether to honor the autonomy of others, whether to trust that people, given the truth and the freedom to choose, will find their own way. Did he make the right choice? Visitors would ask, and the shepherd would smile their ancient smile and say, he made his choice, and he lived with it with integrity and grace. Perhaps that's all anyone can do. Perhaps that's enough. And so we come to the end of this story, the tale of Thomas, the shepherd who remembered everything, the shepherd who collected lost hours, the village that learned to choose. What does this story mean? Like all good stories, it means different things to different people, but perhaps it asks us to consider some questions. Do we have the right to make choices for others, even if we think we know what's best? Or is the act of choosing the autonomy, the agency, the freedom more important than the outcome? How do we make decisions when every option leads to some harm, some suffering? How do we choose between imperfect alternatives with grace and humility? What is the value of memory, of forgetting? Are we diminished by not remembering everything, or are we freed? Is perfect recall a gift or a burden? And how do we honor both perspectives? These questions don't have simple answers. Thomas wrestled with them for years. You may wrestle with them, too, in your own way, in your own time. But here's what I hope you take from this story as you drift toward sleep. Your choices matter even when they're impossible. Especially when they're impossible. The fact that there's no perfect answer doesn't mean you shouldn't try. It doesn't mean your choice is meaningless. You are allowed to feel the weight of your decisions. You are allowed to wonder if you chose rightly. You are allowed to carry that uncertainty with you. But you are also allowed to forgive yourself for being human, for having limited knowledge, for doing the best you could with what you knew at the time. And you are allowed to trust others to make their own choices, even when you think you know better, even when their choices might lead to pain, because autonomy matters. Because dignity matters, because people deserve to author their own lives. Let these thoughts settle over you now like a soft blanket. Let the story of Thomas and the shepherd fade into the background of your consciousness. Let sleep come, gentle and patient as the shepherd themselves, collecting your worries and setting them aside for the night. Tomorrow will bring its own choices, its own impossible questions, but tonight you can rest. Tonight you can set down the weight of decision and simply be. The lost hours will keep, the memories will remain, the choices will wait. For now there is only this, the quiet dark, the soft rhythm of your breathing, the peaceful drift towards sleep. Rest well, You have done enough for today. You are enough. Let go now. Let sleep take you gently into its arms. All is well. All will be well. Rest